LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 15th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing here. This week, I picked out the weekend's 13 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. For what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. I have a list of 13 clips down in the video description. You can follow along on my clip list notes if you want to try to figure out what it was I was saying in those notes, like I try to do while I'm watching the clips or in between the clips, so I can introduce the next clip. The clip of the week I have a political comedy clip from Saturday Night Live I'll get to in a minute, but the clip of the week is Jake Tapper cross-examining Senator Ron Paul on his defense of Trump. You know, you hear from a lot of Republicans that Trump is this big corruption fighter, and Jake Tapper points out he's basically the most corrupt U.S. president, at least since Nixon, maybe in all of history, but gives many examples. So that's the clip of the week. The topic of the week is, again, impeachment. Impeach Trump. I still have the t-shirts going here. This is actually probably this is the last Sunday you can ask me for a t-shirt. If you're an existing patron, I'll send it to you for free. You can become a patron at a link down in the video description. Also, at the $15 level in the U.S. to get, actually, $15 level wherever you are to get one of these t-shirts. But it has to be in the next day or two because I'm giving all the leftovers away on Tuesday to local activists who are they're holding rallies all over the country Tuesday night, right before the House votes on impeachment on Wednesday. There's one here in Sacramento at the Capitol, and I'm giving my leftover shirts away to those activists because Trump is almost definitely getting impeached this Wednesday, because of his scheme to pressure Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy to investigate Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, this weird Crowdstrike conspiracy theory about who hacked the DNC server in 2016, and then he held up military aid, an Oval Office visit, and other signs of support for Ukraine to pressure Ukraine and that's basically what Trump's getting impeached for, and it will happen on Wednesday. And anyway, if you want one of these shirts, tell me if you want a extra large, or medium. You can become a patron. You can click on that join button, or even a direct PayPal contribution of $15 if you live in the U.S. Just give me your shipping address and the size you want today or tomorrow before I give the rest away. And now I'm going to give away a clip from Saturday Night Live, although down at a link in the video description you can see the Saturday Night Live weekend update segment that I'm about to show you, where they cover these are jokes about the impeachment that I will discuss with you after we watch them together over in this clip.
After yesterday's vote approving articles of impeachment, President Trump could become the first president to face impeachment while also running for re-election, because only Democrats could figure out a way to lose twice in the same year. Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler, who was accidentally CGI'd to look like both Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro, appealed to Republicans on the committee, saying, "When Trump's time has passed, how will you be remembered? Remembered, I barely know you now, and I think you're my congressman." I hate to break it to you, but the only way Americans ever remember a congressman is if he sent someone a picture of his penis. And we only remember that because his name was Wiener.
President Trump set a personal record on Thursday when he reacted to impeachment news by posting more than 100 tweets, causing White House officials to ask, "Is everything okay in there, sir?" I don't get why Trump's so worked up. I mean, it's still going to take 2/3 of the Senate to vote him out of office. And that's not going to happen because, well, take a look at the Senate. It'd be like if Obama got voted out of office by the Wu-Tang Clan. But look on the bright side, Democrats. Now you know you can cheat. Why are you nerds still playing by the rules? Literally nothing matters anymore. Kamala dropped out because she ran out of money. Rob a bank. Do y'all want this or not?
I especially like Michael Che's jokes there at the end. Well, I like the Wu-Tang Clan joke with the all-white Senate being like Obama getting convicted by the Wu-Tang Clan. There were a couple other good jokes in there, and especially the idea that Democrats play by the rules and Republicans don't. That's the whole thing. They talk about how there were Democrats who actually voted to impeach Clinton back 21 years ago. It's almost exactly 21 years ago. I'm, of course, old enough to remember when Clinton was impeached, and you're going to see a Lindsey Graham clip a little bit later from CBS News' Face the Nation, where he gets confronted with a very young Lindsey Graham being very in favor of a strong Senate trial. And actually, there's been breaking news since I'm going to show you all the news summaries, but one of the things they don't tell you is that Chuck Schumer just sent a message to Mitch McConnell. Chuck Schumer's the Democratic leader in the Senate. He sent a message to Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, asking for various witnesses, including Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, and John Bolton. And you're going to see that there are at least one senator in a news clip I'm going to show you later says that Mitch McConnell should do what Trent Lott, the Republican majority leader, did back in the Clinton impeachment. He negotiated with Tom Daschle, and they got like unanimous Senate vote on what the rules were going to be and what the evidence that they were going to look at was going to be. And somehow I don't think that's going to happen this week, as you'll see. Well, here's Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press with the best, longest news summary as usual, talking about how Trump is only the fourth president in history to face impeachment. Talks a little bit about what happened with the FBI, and I will have a James Comey clip that's you've noticed that from the title coming up about FBI FISA abuse, which I will talk a little bit. That's not really on the impeachment topic, but I will discuss that briefly when I show the Fox News Sunday clips. And so that shows up in this NBC News Meet the Press news summary. Have we lost our capacity for shock and outrage? And then, of course, that's the live intro going to Chuck Todd's package of clips that I will talk about after we watch that almost 4-minute news summary together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Consider this. For only the fourth time in American history, a president of the United States is facing impeachment. And our national response has been, whatever. Everything that's happened. The House announcing 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump. The president attacking the FBI, joined by his attorney general, even after the Bureau was cleared of political bias in the launching of the Russia investigation. President Trump that same day meeting with Russia's foreign minister, finally the House Judiciary Committee voting to send the 2 impeachment articles to the full House for a vote this week. All of it felt so strangely normal, as is what's about to happen. The House is all but certain to impeach Mr. Trump, and the Senate is just as surely going to acquit him. And then what? As the public reacts with a collective shoulder shrug, it leaves us wondering whether we have lost our capacity to be shocked or moved or outraged anymore. Remember, no matter what happens, Donald Trump will not be president forever. The question is, what will we as a nation look like when we come out at the other side of this drama?
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The article is agreed to.
After a week of contentious debate,
this is a just travesty and a sham from day one.
No president is supposed to be a dictator.
A predictable result.
The House Judiciary Committee has voted articles of impeachment against the president for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress.
Now both parties are making it clear they'd like to vote and move on.
The trade agreement.
The circuit judges.
Lower drug prices.
Defense spending.
The budget for the full year.
Cutting taxes.
Robocalls. In the House, Democrats have sandwiched an impeachment vote on Wednesday between funding the government and passing a revised U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Democrats are running ads defending vulnerable members on anything but impeachment.
Max Rose knows you have to fight like hell to make things better. Thank him for fighting to lower drug prices.
And choosing to let every member vote their conscience rather than whipping votes.
I haven't decided. This has been a busy week in Washington. There's actually been a lot of good bipartisan wins that we got.
I didn't run to impeach anybody. I ran to fight for Oklahoma, for education, for health care, for these things. And that's where I've been spending my time.
The president, nursing resentment about his inevitable impeachment, set a record this week, tweeting more than 400 times, 123 tweets on Thursday alone. But Senate Republican leaders, with an eye on their more vulnerable members, are making it clear the trial planned for January will be brief.
You can certainly make a case for making it shorter rather than longer, since it's such a weak case.
This thing will come to the Senate, and it will die quickly, and I will do everything I can to make it die quickly.
I'll do long or short. I've heard Mitch, I've heard Lindsey. I think they are very much on agreement on some concept. I'll do whatever they want to do. It doesn't matter.
With a Senate acquittal almost guaranteed, what will the political aftermath look like? This impeachment debate has rallied most of the party behind the president, forcing even swing district Republicans to borrow his language.
It's a sham.
This is a sham. Much of this is a sham.
But on the Senate side, the vulnerable Republicans have been able to stay silent so far. Meanwhile, swing state Democrats are using the same language they used in 2018.
I'll stand with the president and next to the president when he does something right, but I'll stand up to him when he does something wrong.
And the president's 2020 opponents are weighing how to capitalize on that Democratic base anger while offering a vision about something other than Trump to the rest of the country.
How is my life going to be different if you're president versus one of the others? And our message is about preparing for an America after Trump.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware and member.
And actually, my last two clips are Chris Coons and Ted Cruz. Chris Coons and Pat Toomey, who were both guests on NBC News' Meet the Press. I do have a Ted Cruz clip coming up as well. But like I said, that was the longest, best news summary of... I mean, there were all sorts of things that happened this week that weren't in that news summary. That's the thing, that there's so much news in the Trump era that the news summaries of the week are pale imitations of what you watched if you are glued to cable news as much as I am during the week, most of the time. But this next news summary is from ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where it's much shorter. This is less than a minute. He talks about, there's like this weird subtext, George Stephanopoulos used to work for Bill Clinton, and there's this weird subtext of like, I used to work for Bill Clinton in this 1 minute news summary, because he talks about how in the first 150 years, or first 100 years, there were only 2 impeachments, but now in the last 21 years, there have been 2, and looks like Trump's going to be acquitted like Clinton was. And I don't know, you can tell me if you think there's like a George Stephanopoulos, I worked for Clinton subtext in this brief news summary from ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. For the first 200 years of our history, only 2 American presidents faced impeachment. This week, the House will vote to impeach for the second time in just 21 years. All but certain to approve 2 articles against Donald Trump, almost to the day Bill Clinton faced a similar fate in December 1998. And like Clinton, Trump is all but certain to be acquitted along party lines. Historians will weigh what that says about the presidents we choose, the actions they've taken, and the times we live in. For now, for us, the job is figuring out what it means, what to do as we approach a national election with an impeached president on the ballot for the first time in American history. And this morning, we begin with the 2 Democrats leading impeachment in the House. Intelligence share.
And I actually have a clip of Adam Schiff from Fox News Sunday coming up, and then Jerry Nadler from ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos, responding to the way some Republicans like Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham have completely eschewed their oath as jurors in the impeachment trial, the trial after impeachment, the conviction and removal trial that's supposed to take place in the Senate. If you are following along on your Constitution, I have my pocket Constitution, of course, as always. Both Mitch McConnell said that his position is going to be basically in lockstep with what the White House wants, which that's like the foreman of the jury saying they're going to talk to the defendant's lawyer about everything they do. That doesn't even make sense. And Lindsey Graham basically said that he wants to kill the trial as quickly as possible because it's a sham, and that also doesn't fit with the oath. But before I get to that, that'll be coming up. I just wanted to mention that because you saw Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff were both guests together on ABC News this week, and I will show a Jerry Nadler response to Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham's clips in a little bit. I believe that's clip number 9. But I want to get to the CNN State of the Union news summary from Jake Tapper, a little bit longer than the last one we just saw. We're bracing for the impact with our defiant, the president is defiant, and actually Jake Tapper, to show he's, fair and balanced, talks about the Democrat who's going to have to switch to be a Republican. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch this 101-second clip together from the beginning of CNN State of the Union together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is bracing for impact. President Donald J. Trump's name will likely be added to a very short list in the history books this week, but certainly not in the way he may have hoped, as the House of Representatives considers whether to use the strongest rebuke the U.S. Constitution allows them to make him just the third U.S. president to ever be impeached. The defiant president is watching the drama unfold from the White House as he plots his response in a Senate trial. Overnight, the president welcomed the news that one House Democrat who opposes impeachment, Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, is expected to switch parties and become a Republican. And the White House is confident that the president will be acquitted in the Senate. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham showed this weekend that he and his party have come a long way since Bill Clinton's impeachment in 1998, when then Congressman Graham said this.
If a Republican president would have done this, let me just say this. It would be a good test for us. If a Republican president had done these things, would a Republican delegation gone to tell him to get out of town? I hope so. I would like to think that we would have done that.
Well, they have that opportunity right now. And in contrast, yesterday, Lindsey Graham told CNN, quote, "I'm not trying to be a fair juror here."
This thing will come to the Senate, and it will die quickly, and I will do everything I can to make it die quickly. I am trying to give a pretty clear signal. I have made up my mind.
Joining me now is Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Senator, thanks for joining us as always.
And like I said, the clip of the week is going to be Jake Tapper cross-examining Rand Paul on how the most corrupt U.S. president, at least since Nixon, is the big corruption fighter in Ukraine. That, if you're following along, is clip number 11. But now I want to sort of delve into the alternative universe where Chris Wallace did some good stuff on Fox News Sunday this week, but you'll see that they concentrated a lot more on the Inspector General's report about FBI wrongdoing in terms of getting FISA applications, even though the main takeaway from the Inspector General report was that the investigation into Donald Trump and Russia collusion, as they call it, or it's really how several individuals might be involved with foreign intelligence agents. That was opened with, they just need a reasonable suspicion to open a foreign intelligence investigation. It's not even the probable cause they need for a criminal investigation. And the Inspector General said that the investigation into Carter Page and everybody else, that was not based on political bias, but there were some problems. And anyway, that was the main focus of the news summary from Fox News Sunday. And then they actually had James Comey on. I saw James Comey had tweeted earlier that that was Sandy shaking her collar, and I will have a bonus Stash and Sandy clip later, but I seem to have agitated Sandy by talking so loudly. But anyway, there was this tweet from James Comey where he said that he was booked to be on Fox and Friends the morning after the Inspector General report came out, and they canceled. He wanted to be on Fox and Friends because he knows that's where our president, Donald Trump, gets like a huge proportion of his news, is watching Fox and Friends in the morning, which is pretty scary if you have ever watched Fox and Friends. But they canceled having James Comey on, but I guess he made it on to Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace asked him some important questions about FISA abuse and I will talk about that before I show that clip of Chris Wallace cross-examining James Comey, which is the clip after next. But the next clip is the news summary from Fox News Sunday, which briefly covered impeachment, but really emphasized how it was on a party line vote. And you'll see Kevin Corke, Chris Wallace gives it to reporter Kevin Corke, and he starts with like the big achievements, Trump doing his job, like kind of like how Clinton got out of impeachment by continuing to show he was working for the American people. Trump doesn't do a good job of that, but you wouldn't know that from the beginning of Kevin Corke's news summary, and I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that final news summary for the program tonight over here.
Hello again from Fox News in Washington. This week, members of the House will cast one of the most consequential votes of their careers, for or against impeaching the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. Democrats are expected to approve 2 articles of impeachment on a straight party line vote, setting up a Senate trial early next year. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of the Justice Department released his long-awaited report on the FBI's handling of the Trump-Russia investigation. In a moment, we'll discuss that in an exclusive interview with former FBI Director James Comey. But first, let's bring in Kevin Corke with the latest from the White House. Kevin.
Chris, trade deals with Canada and Mexico, even China, and a major domestic policy victory on paid family leave. Normally, each would be a headline in its own right, but the release of the long-awaited IG report and, of course, a party line vote on impeachment overshadowed them all.
Today is a solemn and sad day.
It went as expected.
Aye.
A 23-17 party line Judiciary Committee vote, charging the president with abusing the power of his office over the Ukraine scandal and obstructing House Democrats' attempt to investigate him for it. The move now sets the stage for a full House vote this week, where Democrats currently hold 233 seats and would only need 216 votes. While new Fox polling suggests the nation remains split on impeachment, with no change since early October, though a majority of those surveyed believe he did abuse his power.
The impeachment is a hoax. It's a sham.
The president, meanwhile, remained defiant, buoyed by the fact that leaders of the GOP-controlled Senate have made it clear that if there's a trial, they won't remove him from office. And perhaps by the release of the long-awaited Inspector General's report investigating FISA abuse and the origins of the Russia probe, which found significant inaccuracies and omissions made in applications to surveil Trump campaign aide Carter Page, inflaming the president's rhetoric that his campaign and indeed his presidency were spied upon. Inspector General Horowitz said he was deeply concerned that there were so many basic fundamental errors made by 3 hand-picked investigative teams, though he said he was unable to prove any political bias. Chris?
Kevin Corke.
So that's the Fox News summary. And do you notice how they slipped in the middle? One of the things I learned when I used to be a trial attorney is if you want to hide something that you have to say, you stick it in the middle of a 5 or, well, that was just like a 3-minute speech or a 3-minute news summary there. Well, really 2.5 minutes. But because people remember the stuff at the beginning, it's called primacy. And then people remember stuff at the end, that's called recency, if you've taken any psychology courses about memory. But so if you stick it in the middle, like there was a Fox News poll there that said that 50% of Americans want Trump impeached and removed. And even a larger majority, well, that was like a plurality majority, but even an actual majority think that he abused his power, which is one of the 2 articles of impeachment. By the way, down in the video description, I put a link to the 2 articles of impeachment from the House of Representatives website if you want to read what Trump isn't being impeached for, but impeach Trump. I just wanted to say that. And the thing about these FISA abuses that I find so disingenuous from Fox News is I made multiple videos about back when like the FISA Amendments Act in 2008 was, I'm sorry, I just hit my phone on the table there. The FISA Amendments Act was up for debate in the Congress, and actually down in the video description I put a link to my video about how the ACLU fought warrantless wiretapping, that it was approved by Obama, McCain, and Bush. Like, it was bipartisan agreement. I think actually Rand Paul might have been against it, but it was pretty obvious back when, and James Comey, you know, had a role in the original warrantless wiretapping under George W. Bush right after 9/11, where there's this whole weird incident where John Ashcroft, who was the Attorney General, was getting gallbladder surgery, and James Comey was like momentarily in charge, and he wouldn't approve the warrantless wiretapping program that obviously violated the Constitution. And that's one of the things that made me think that James Comey had some integrity, and then the way he treated Hillary Clinton right before the election and basically tipped the election in favor of Trump by doing something prosecutors aren't supposed to do, that like pushed his reputation in another direction. And this FISA report shows something that you'll see I talked about back in 2008, that it's way too easy for the FBI or the NSA to spy on Americans using this foreign intelligence excuse to do it. And it seems that the idea that cops and prosecutors lie to judges in order to get warrants, that happens to poor people all over the country all the time. As a former public defender, a criminal defense attorney for people who were accused of crimes and couldn't afford a lawyer, back a long time ago, I did that job for about 5 years, and that's what I find especially disingenuous about all the people who are so shocked about FISA abuses, both that they didn't oppose the FISA Amendments Act. And for my Throwback Thursday, by the way, I tweeted this. All the Republicans shocked that FISA allows the FBI to spy on Americans should be asked if they supported the FISA Amendments Act I warned about in my 2008 video, ACLU Fights Wiretapping Approved by Obama, McCain, and Bush. And I put a link there to that video, and there's a link down in the video description to that video if you want to look at a video I made 11 years ago talking about FISA abuses that James Comey is shocked to find out. And one of the things he says in this next answer is that it's very difficult to get a FISA warrant, which I don't think is true. It's not difficult enough, but I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch Chris Wallace kind of cross-examine James Comey. If Fox News hadn't been a big supporter of FISA abuses back 10, 11 years ago, but here Chris Wallace is really worried about it, talking to James Comey in this clip.
You have been taking something of a victory lap since the IG report was released earlier this week. The question is whether or not it's justified. Here are you and the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, answering the same question.
Do you think this is vindication?
It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The IG says you should feel no vindication.
Well, maybe it turns upon how we understand the word. What I mean is that the FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense. I think it's really important that the Inspector General looked at that and that the American people, your viewers and all viewers, understand that's true. But he also found things that we were never accused of, which is real sloppiness, and that's concerning. As I've said all along, has to be focused on. If I were director, I'd be very concerned about it and diving into it.
Well, sloppiness may be a euphemism for what it is he found. One of his big concerns is the way the FBI handled the FISA applications and the warrants that allowed you to surveil Carter Page, who was a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Again, here is what you said about the FISA process and what the Inspector General Horowitz said this week. Take a look.
have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications. 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong. I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable. And so he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures. And it's important that a leader be accountable and transparent. If I were still director, I'd be saying exactly the same thing that Chris Wray is saying, which is we are going to get to the bottom of this. Because the most important question is it systemic? Are there problems in other cases?
One of the central issues is the role that the Steele dossier played.
And if you want to hear about the Steele dossier, there's a link down in the video description to the entire Fox News Sunday episode, and the rest of that interview, I believe, is available at that link. But I think that James Comey clip was enough. I pretty much pre-criticized it, but I have to say again, when he says, it's difficult to get a FISA, I think, if anything, this whole IG report shows you it's too easy to get a FISA. They changed the rules with the FISA Amendments Act back in 2008 that I criticized Barack Obama for voting for while he was running for president, even though I still voted for him for president. And it's because, of course, it was it's the ACLU fought that, but it was supported by Obama, McCain, and Bush. So who do you vote for, I guess? I could have voted for a third-party candidate, the Green Party candidate or whatever, but I find it pretty disingenuous that Republicans are all of a sudden upset about FISA when it's been a problem for over a decade. Actually, going back to when James Comey stopped the whole story I was talking about where James Comey was standing in for John Ashcroft, who was having gallbladder surgery and wouldn't approve the original warrantless wiretapping program under George W. Bush. So anyway, I want to show one more Fox News Sunday clip. This is Adam Schiff, to his credit, went on Fox News Sunday, took the, Trump tweeted something negative about Fox News Sunday, how they're getting soft by having James Comey and Adam Schiff on there, and Fox News is still biased. I think I already pointed out some bias from Fox News. But Fox News Sunday is one of the few remaining shows where they occasionally practice a little bit of journalism, even though it still, like that Kevin Corke news summary could have been written by Stephanie Grisham, the White House communications, the White House press secretary. Stephanie Grisham could have written Kevin Corke's summary there, I think, pretty much, or pretty close anyway. But here you see Chris Wallace cross-examining Adam Schiff about the second article of impeachment, which on its face seems like it might be an overreach because it's obstruction of Congress, even though some of the issues are still going through the courts. But what Trump has done is he's asserted this right to absolute immunity, because even Nixon sent witnesses in, like his chief of staff, his White House counsel, and then he asserted executive privilege about certain matters, which is what Trump should have done. But Trump instead said, no documents, no witnesses, I have absolute immunity from this sham process. And anyway, Adam Schiff makes that point with Chris Wallace in the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Sweep of the president's misconduct.
All right. You also accuse him, another article of impeachment is obstructing Congress by refusing to comply with subpoenas. But on Friday, the Supreme Court agreed to hear cases where the House had subpoenaed the president's financial records, and the Supreme Court says it wants to hear and deliberate that case. So why is going to court an impeachable offense?
Well, going to court is not an impeachable offense. Stonewalling completely, refusing to comply with the oversight of Congress, particularly during an impeachment inquiry, is an impeachable offense. Indeed, Richard Nixon was about to be impeached for a far less comprehensive effort to stonewall the Congress of his day. And I would just say to my Republican colleagues who appear to be on the verge of shirking their constitutional duty, if they're prepared to say that a president of the United States can simply say no to any congressional subpoena and tie up the Congress for years in litigation, it is going to have to accept corruption, malfeasance, negligence, misconduct in any future president, Democrat or Republican. Are we really prepared to go down that road? In many respects, Chris, I think this may be the most serious of the articles because it would fundamentally alter the balance of power and allow for much greater misconduct in the chief executive of the country. The last point I'd make, Chris, is among the acts of stonewalling is the utter refusal to turn over a single document from any of the departments, to turn over the notes, for example, of Ambassador Taylor or his cable to Secretary Pompeo. All of these things are being withheld. There is no legal basis to do so. And so, yes, the president can sue all he wants. It's a delay tactic, and he's repeatedly lost in court. But that doesn't make it any less an act of obstruction.
President Trump says that if the House...
So, like I said before I showed the clip, I think that's a good explanation from Adam Schiff. And, you know, I know a lot of Republicans have fixated on Adam Schiff and said that he ran a biased process in the Intelligence Committee, even though what the House is doing, the impeachment, is kind of like a grand jury where defendants don't get a lot of rights. It's mostly up to the prosecutor who the witnesses are. The defendant doesn't get to be there unless the prosecutor, in rare occasions, decides to call the defendant, and the defense lawyer doesn't get to be there. An indictment is just an accusation, just like impeachment is just an accusation, and then it goes to the trial where the senators are supposed to be impartial jurors. They're supposed to take an oath, a special impeachment oath where they swear to be impartial jurors. But Mitch McConnell gave this interview with Sean Hannity where he said that he was going to take the position of whatever the White House wanted. And you saw that Lindsey Graham clip earlier in the news summaries where he said that he wants to kill impeachment. Now, this next clip I'm going to show you is Lindsey Graham over on CBS News' Face the Nation, where Margaret Brennan didn't actually ask him about what he said in those previous clips about wanting to kill impeachment, about that he was already biased as a juror. But she did show this really old clip of Lindsey Graham from when he was a House impeachment manager in the Senate, talking about how it couldn't just be a one-day trial, there had to be witnesses, and asked him about that, where, again, he just reiterated what you saw in the previous clips, that he just wants to get rid of this trial as soon as possible, regardless of what he said back in 1998, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that one CBS News Face the Nation clip I'm going to show you tonight over here.
What I think is best for the country.
Well, back when you were in the House during the Clinton impeachment, you were an impeachment manager. And I want to play a clip from what you said on Face the Nation back then in 1999.
And all I ask for is a chance to do it meaningful. If you have one day and you're stuck with the judiciary report, I don't think history will judge the Senate well. If they decide to acquit the president, there needs to be a record well developed where both sides had a chance to prove their case. So I hope we have a trial that is meaningful, that will withstand historical scrutiny, that will follow the precedents of the past. I've never known an impeachment trial without a witness and just lasting one day to present the case for the House. That's frankly not fair.
Why have your standards for Senate trial changed?
Well, Ken Starr investigated President Clinton for years, spent millions of dollars. He was an outside counsel. Bob Mueller investigated Donald Trump for 2 years, spent $25 million. I supported the Mueller investigation because I think he would be fair. It was not a witch hunt in my view. This is the first impeachment trial being driven by partisan politicians, conducted behind closed doors. The testimony was selectively leaked. The president was denied the ability to participate meaningful in the House hearing, and I want to end it. I have nothing but disdain for this. I'm trying to make myself clear. What you're doing in the House is bad for the presidency. You're impeaching the President of the United States in a matter of weeks, not months. You had a 2-year investigation. That wasn't enough. I think this whole thing is a crock. You're shutting the president out. The process in the House, any partisan group could do this in the future. You're weaponizing impeachment, and I want to end it. I don't want to legitimize it. I hate what they're doing.
Rudy Giuliani spoke to our...
So even though Margaret Brennan didn't ask Lindsey Graham about his previous statements, he pretty much reiterated them in his answer, where he said that he is as biased a juror as one could imagine when it comes to the impeachment going to the Senate for a trial, despite the oath he's supposed to take. I'm actually going to show you that oath in the clip after next, the Ted Cruz clip, where Ted Cruz responds to what Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff said about what Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham said, how they're already biased jurors. And this clip from ABC News' This Week with George Stephanopoulos is actually just Jerry Nadler. I cut it before Adam Schiff's response. But you hear a lot of the same language about, this is all about whether the president can be held accountable at all, whether, we have checks and balances, whether we have, a democracy or a monarchy. I think the word monarchy shows up in Jerry Nadler's answer here, but you get to see both Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham showing that they are not approaching this impeachment with open minds at all. In the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
It's deeply at risk.
Let's look ahead to the Senate trial. Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, was out speaking about how he's going to handle the trial this week on Fox.
Everything I do during this, I'm coordinating with White House counsel. There will be no difference between the president's position and our position as to how to handle this to the extent that we can.
I'm not trying to pretend to be a fair juror here. So what I see happening today is just a partisan nonsense.
It's pretty clear, Chairman Nadler, that the Republicans in the Senate, at least the leadership, is going to be in lockstep with the president on this. Is there anything you can do about that?
Well, the senators, the Constitution prescribes a special oath for the senators when they sit as a trial in impeachment. They have to pledge to do impartial justice. And here you have the majority leader of the Senate, in effect the foreman of the jury, saying he's going to work hand in glove with the defense attorney. That's a violation of the oath that they're about to take, and it's a complete subversion of the constitutional scheme. We will have done our duty in the House to protect the national security of our country and the integrity of our democratic process, which is what is really at stake here. I hope that despite what you just heard, that they will do their duty and will look into this and will see the uncontroverted facts. Remember, these facts are basically uncontroverted. The president solicited, he blackmailed the foreign government into giving aid to his election, using funds that were appropriated for military aid to a country under invasion by Russia. And there's virtually no controversy about that. And then he ordered everyone not to testify in order to cover it up. This is a subversion of the constitutional order, a subversion of our democracy. And if he gets away with it, future presidents of either party will be able to really change the nature of our government. This changes the nature of our government. Do we have a constitutional democracy, or do we have a monarchy where the president is unaccountable? That's what's at stake here.
Chairman Schiff, the president has had differing views on what he wants.
And I think Jerry Nadler did a good job there. I don't think he did as good a job as Adam Schiff as chair of a committee investigating impeachment. But he did a pretty good job, a better job than he did earlier with Robert Mueller. And, Robert Mueller was in both committees. And then some of the other pre-impeachment investigations, I think Adam Schiff did a better job than Jerry Nadler. But you notice he slipped in there the abuse of power facts, even though he was also talking about the obstruction of Congress facts mostly. And he brought up the oath that senators are supposed to take before they become jurors, that they're supposed to be impartial jurors. And This next clip is actually George Stephanopoulos asking Senator Ted Cruz about that oath, where you'll see at the beginning he actually, puts it up on the screen. You can see the oath that senators are supposed to take. And Ted Cruz kind of dodges the question about whether Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham have already violated their oath, and he just says he's going to follow the oath, which George Stephanopoulos lets him get away with. But actually then the rest of what Ted Cruz says is pretty much true, that even though they're jurors and they take this oath to be impartial jurors, it's still a very political process, and it's not really like a criminal trial. And other than the dodge about Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell already deciding the result when they're taking this oath to be impartial jurors, deciding the result beforehand, that goes too far. But the rest of what he says about the impeachment trial being a political process is pretty much true, to give Ted Cruz at least that point, which I will talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
To investigate this as well, but I do want to move on to the Senate trial. You heard both Chairman Nadler and Chairman Schiff respond to Senator McConnell's and Lindsey Graham's statement this week, and I do want to put up the impeachment oath, the oath you're going to take before any potential Senate trial. And it says, "I solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that in all things appertaining to the trial of the impeachment now pending, I will do impartial justice according to the Constitution and the laws, so help me God." Aren't the comments from Senator McConnell and Senator Graham indicating that they would be in violation of that oath?
Well, look, I fully intend to follow by oath, but the oath of a Senate juror, it has some similarities to a criminal trial, but it has some differences as well. The framers understood that impeachment, particularly the impeachment of a president, is inherently a political exercise. Senators are not required, like jurors in a criminal trial, to be sequestered, not to talk to anyone, not to coordinate. There's no prohibition. And by the way, past trials, you look at the Clinton impeachment trials, the Senate Democrats were all talking with the Clinton White House. You look at this impeachment trial, the House Democrats are all talking with the Senate Democrats. This remains a political process. The framers knew what they were doing when they put it into the political branches. But there are also legal and constitutional standards to be followed. And George, if you go back 3-4 weeks, you remember there was a moment 3-4 weeks ago where every House Democrat began saying the word bribery over and over and over again. I'm sure they said it on your show. The reason is the Democratic Campaign Committee did some polling, and the focus groups told them bribery polled really well, that people thought, ooh, bribery is bad, so that their talking points that everyone used were bribery, bribery, bribery. Well, fast forward to this week. This week, they've abandoned bribery. They don't allege bribery. There's no article of impeachment on bribery. Instead, what they're arguing is they can impeach with zero evidence of a crime. They don't have to prove any criminal law was violated. They don't have to prove any federal law was violated. They don't have to prove the president has a speeding ticket. What we're seeing now, they've abandoned that whole allegation of bribery, and this is fundamentally political opposition. The base, the far left of the House Democrats hate the president, and they're mad at the American people for electing him. And this is trying to undermine an election. And it's why it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. It's not going to go anywhere in the Senate because the facts don't back them up. You heard lots of rhetoric from Schiff and Nadler, but what we didn't hear was actual facts, because the witnesses did not demonstrate any law was broken. And that doesn't meet the constitutional standard for impeachment, which is treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors.
But it doesn't require a crime.
They haven't met the burden of proof.
It doesn't require a crime, as you know. But the final question, are there 51 votes in the Senate?
So George Stephanopoulos is right there at the end when he says that impeachment doesn't require a crime. High crimes and misdemeanors are not necessarily limited to crimes in the U.S. code, U.S. criminal code, federal crimes, or whatever. The word high in high crimes and misdemeanors, if you were watching the Constitutional Lawyers the week before last, actually modifies both crimes and misdemeanors, and the word high actually means related to high office. So abuse of power is a high crime because it's a crime related to an office. And I agree with, I said before, I agree with what Ted Cruz said about a Senate trial not being exactly like a criminal trial, since I did do criminal trials many years ago, because jurors are allowed to talk to each other, allowed to collude together and create factions and whatever. It's not like a criminal trial in that sense. But what he said about bribery, just because there may be some problems proving that dirt on Joe Biden is something of value for the criminal bribery statute 18 U.S.C. 201, which is, of course, it'll link down in the video description. The word bribery in the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 4, where they say that is a way that is a ground for impeachment of the president, that's a much more broad term about just subverting the public good for private gain. That's what bribery means in that case. But anyway, that's the one thing I disagree with that Ted Cruz said in that clip. And now I want to get to what I said at the beginning is the clip of the week. Jake Tapper cross-examining Senator Rand Paul on this bogus Republican argument that when the whole Trump investigations in Ukraine, that he wanted these investigations in Ukraine because he's such a big corruption fighter. And I love the first part of this question where CNN puts up a graphic of all the people from the Trump administration who've been convicted of various corrupt things. So that shows that Trump isn't a big corruption fighter. And of course he brings up the Trump charity, he brings up Trump University, and Rand Paul doesn't really deal with all of that, but just talks about how foreign aid is corrupt in general. And I don't know, Jake Tapper does a pretty good job. I don't know why Sandy's shaking there, but I will talk about all of that a little more with you after you watch that 3.5-minute cross-examination by Jake Tapper of Rand Paul together over here.
Exactly what he asked to be done.
So you're saying that you think that President Trump was actually doing this because he was combating corruption. This is, of course, a president.
Well, yeah, there are all kinds of accusations that Burisma and Hunter Biden and the company were corrupt, and the founder of the company was corrupt.
But this is a president whose former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, former national security advisor, Mike Flynn, former campaign advisor, Roger Stone, former deputy campaign chair, Rick Gates, former associate, George Papadopoulos, all of them have been convicted of federal crimes. In addition, last year, Trump University settled a $25 million fraud lawsuit. Last month, President Trump admitted misusing his own charitable foundation's money, was ordered to pay $2 million. You really think President Trump is concerned about rooting out corruption?
I think most of what you listed and most of the people that were indicted or convicted were alleged to have been part of some sort of huge Russian conspiracy. But I think what we found out from the Inspector General's report is that it was all based on a false premise that Carter Page had something to do with
The Trump
Russia.
Justice Department put all those people in prison or sentenced all those people. It's not me.
It turns out that the FBI hid information that Carter Page all along was telling another part of the government, the CIA,
that doesn't absolve Paul Manafort
was getting, incidentally,
of money laundering.
The whole investigation that started this, General Flynn was not guilty of anything to do with Russians. General Flynn was guilty of not reciting his conversation.
I'm asking you about President Trump and corruption.
With him.
I'm asking you about President Trump and corruption. I just listed a number of close associates of President Trump's who are either in prison or facing sentencing.
But I think it's based on opinion. It's based on
these are sentences. These are criminal sentences.
His opinion on foreign aid is similar to mine. Mine is a little more exacting. But the president has had doubts on foreign aid. He said the Europeans should pay more. He withheld it. In fact, the law allows any president to withhold aid as long as they want until the end of the fiscal year.
And Ukraine had been cleared.
Act.
Ukraine had been cleared on the benchmarks it needed to meet in terms of getting that aid that Congress passed.
According to the president, I don't know that he had accepted that they had been cleared because
let me just
he was
get back
holding up their aid.
I just wanted to know: do you really think President Trump is concerned about corruption? Just a yes or no. Is that something you really believe?
Yes, I do think that Ukraine. I think Ukraine has been one of the corruptest countries on earth.
That's not what I asked.
Russian-backed or Western-backed, all the governments of Ukraine have been corrupt. And yes, I do think that foreign aid does not cure corruption. I think foreign aid aids and abets corruption. And if you look at studies, you actually find that the more corrupt nations get more money because we think we're going to somehow make them better.
Okay, so
but they steal the money. Look at the Mubaraks.
But you're not really answering the question.
They stole $20-30 billion. Well, sure, I'm answering the question. I think
you're saying you're concerned about corruption.
Foreign aid.
Okay. But let's be clear here.
The president was too. If you listen to the president's speeches throughout his campaign and throughout his administration, he's been concerned with corruption with regard to foreign aid. Every time I talk to the president, he's talking about how countries are taking from us and not doing as we have asked them to do and not being good allies. And so this is a common theme, and I think it's a political point, and I think the Democrats are trying to impeach him for politics they disagree with.
So just to be clear, this precedent that you are prepared to set, you would be okay with a president saying...
So, good effort there by Jake Tapper to try to get Rand Paul to admit that the Republican argument that Trump is a great corruption fighter is ridiculous, given all the people associated with him who are involved in crimes, how he didn't, Michael Cohen's plea allocution says that he was directed to commit campaign finance crimes, covering up the whole Stormy Daniels payments. He was directed to do that by the President of the United States, and directing someone to commit a federal felony, as I talked about when that happened. And you can see the Michael Cohen plea allocution down at a link in the video description. The prosecutor and the judge aren't supposed to accept that plea allocution unless they have a reasonable basis to know that it is factual. So I actually think there's a reasonable basis to believe that the Southern District of New York has an indictment with Trump's name on it just for that felony. That doesn't mention the Mueller report obstruction of justice felonies and the Trump charity with the $2 million payment just in this month that Rand Paul never really responded to. Trump University, Trump stakes, Trump whatever, Trump casinos went bank. So many Trump scams that we're supposed to think that he is a corruption fighter. That is the Republican defense. Trump is a fighter of corruption. It's like when Trump says Rudy Giuliani's been a crime fighter for all these years. But anyway, if you look at Rudy Giuliani's recent client list, especially people like Lev Parnas and Igor Froman, Sausage King of Chicago. No, that was Abe Froman from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you are a fan of Matthew Broderick in his early days, you know Abe Froman, Sausage King of Chicago, not Igor Froman and Lev Parnas, who apparently are going to get Rudy Giuliani indicted by the Southern District of New York, where he used to be the U.S. attorney. But that is a whole different story, and now it just proves my point that Jake Tapper was trying to make to Rand Paul, that Trump is not a corruption fighter. Rudy Giuliani, not a corruption fighter. It's a ludicrous defense. But the last two clips I want to show you now, before I finish up the program with my bonus Dash and Sandy clip, these are two clips from NBC News' Meet the Press that I think may foreshadow what's going to happen in the Senate. These are two senators, Chris Coons from Delaware, I think, and then Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, Democrat and Republican. And Pat Toomey is a Republican in one of the swingiest swing states that Trump won. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those are the ones that won Trump the presidency, and maybe swinging back in 2020. We'll see how that all works out. But Chris Coons in this first clip talks about how Mitch McConnell should do what Trent Lott did 21 years ago with Tom Daschle in the Clinton impeachment, which is negotiate the terms. And like I said before I showed the first news summary, the breaking news is that Chuck Schumer has asked Mitch McConnell for a deal like what Chris Coons is about to talk about, where the Senate calls witnesses that so far have not testified, including Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, who knows why the Ukrainian funds were held up, and actually held a press conference where he said it was basically a quid pro quo for the Crowdstrike conspiracy theory investigation. Get over it. And then he walked that statement back later and hasn't talked to anybody since then. And of course, John Bolton, who said this whole thing was a drug deal. But here, that is breaking news. Here's Chris Coons asserting the position that I think is going to be the position of Democrats in the Senate, that there should be a deal worked out between the majority and the minority over in this clip.
So let me just start with what you'd like to see from a Senate trial, but try to address it this way. It feels like to many Americans, we already know what the outcome's going to be. And in fact, it feels as if the process, in some ways, the leaders in Capitol Hill, both on the House Democratic side and the Senate Republican side, have decided to try to shorten everything, right? Shorten the investigation process, shorten the trial. Where does that leave us?
Well, Chuck, that's a great question. What needs to happen next, now that it's clear that the House is going to vote out 2 articles of impeachment, and we will likely, for only the 3rd time in our history, have President Trump on trial in front of the Senate early next year. Majority Leader McConnell needs to sit down with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and negotiate over exactly what the terms of this trial will be. The American people deserve the truth, not political theater. And so I think all of us know what would constitute a fair and a reasonable, a serious and an open trial. In the House, we saw lots and lots of evidence, witnesses and documents that supported the charges against the president. And the president really stonewalled making any defensive case. Those of us who will be sitting as jurors owe it to history to keep an open mind, and if the president participates, to give him a chance to make his case. But this has to start with Senators McConnell and Schumer sitting down and beginning a real bipartisan negotiation about what rules will govern this trial.
Let me play for you something Senator McConnell said. Senator McConnell said he's not negotiating with Senator Schumer, but with lawyers at the White House. Let me play the bite right now.
Well, exactly how we go forward, I'm going to coordinate with the president's lawyers. So there won't be any difference between us on how to do this. We all know how it's going to end.
Do you see any problem with Mitch McConnell coordinating with the president's lawyers?
Well, I certainly think what he should start by doing is trying to show the American people in history that this is a serious trial. Try to imagine a typical trial in a typical courtroom where the person who is the foreman of the jury is literally talking to the defendant's attorneys day in and day out. I just think in the best interests of the Senate and of the American people, what we need here is a small number, 4 or more, of Republican senators who go to Majority Leader McConnell and say, instead of simply coordinating with President Trump, you should work across the aisle, try and get unanimity, as happened in the Bill Clinton trial, about what these rules should be going forward.
Are you?
So what Chris Coons says there should happen, or what he wants to happen is what should happen, but is that what is going to happen? I mean, you saw what Mitch McConnell has said, what Lindsey Graham has said. Do they sound like they're going to work for unanimity across the aisle? Or are they going to try to... I mean, Lindsey Graham basically said he's going to try to kill it as fast as possible. Mitch McConnell said he's going to take the position that the White House wants, although there's been some ambiguity that where Trump's saying he wants a long trial. He wants to call Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the whistleblower and Adam Schiff and... Sorry, there's Dash and Sandy, and I will have a Dash and Sandy clip coming up in just a minute. But like I said, that was Chris Coons previewing what Chuck Schumer has done since the Sunday morning news shows and called for actual witnesses. And whether that will happen, it's not just there are 46 Democrats, so they need at least 4 Republicans to join them. But here's Pat Toomey, a swing state Republican, and he's not up for election till 2022, but there are other Republicans like Cory Gardner and Susan Collins, who are up for election soon, or Mitt Romney, who knows where Mitt Romney's going to end up. But all they need is 4 or 5, and that's all it takes to change the rules. And here's Pat Toomey saying that he may not be comfortable with no witnesses. I wonder if I can get an extra Dash and Sandy clip here, because they're right together, but I don't know. We'll see while we watch this last clip together over here.
I primarily want to talk about USMCA and China trade, but let me ask you a question about the length of the trial, the process of the trial. Number one, appropriate for Senator Mitch McConnell to be working with the president's lawyers on how this trial should go?
I think it's appropriate to make sure that the president gets a fair trial here.
Okay.
And I think that's the idea. I think it would be extremely inappropriate to put a bullet in this thing immediately when it comes over. I think we ought to hear what the House impeachment managers have to say, give the president's attorneys an opportunity to make the defense, and then make a decision about whether and to what extent it would go forward from there.
You comfortable with no witnesses?
I'm not comfortable making that decision right now. But it might come to that, Chuck. You know, there might be a lot of agreement on facts in the case that could be stipulated. I think there's a big disagreement about what rises to a level of impeachment. So after the arguments are made, then I think that's the time to decide whether witnesses are necessary.
You're a veteran of this town. Both chambers you've served in. It was remarkable.
So I don't know. What do you think from what Pat Toomey said there? Of all the Republicans I showed, he seemed most reasonable because he's in the swingiest of the states. But do you think there might be 4 or 5 Republicans who want like a real trial in the Senate, unlike Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I did get like an extra Dash and Sandy clip, but before, just right over there while I was showing that last clip. But first, I want to show the Super Chat contributors. I want to thank them. Here's a screenshot I took. Thanks Kettle Chips for the new membership. Thanks Noni Cosio for noticing my speech at the local county board of supervisors about our sheriff here in Sacramento, which also has to do with government transparency and accountability. But I also took this bonus Dash and Sandy clip there. I'm surrounded by Dash and Sandy here. I want to show you at the end of this. I kind of like kicked Sandy in the butt to get a little Dash and Sandy interaction, which I saw someone a couple weeks ago claiming I was like a Hitchcock director for abusing my stars to create drama, but that's kind of what I did in the final Dash and Sandy clip over here. And that's what it looks like right over there to my left. No one has commented on how I have a new Jim Crow over here, but I also have a new Jim Crow over in the Dash and Sandy clip. That's because, that's my hardcover version that I read actually right over here. But then down over there, I have a second signed copy I got from, it's a long story, but it's signed by Michelle Alexander. That's why I have a paperback that's signed and then a hardcover up on my bookshelf. And no one even noticed that, but there are 2 copies of the new Jim Crow. That's how important it is. Read that book. Has nothing to do with impeachment. It's totally off topic, but it's one of the best books of the 21st century, I think, in some list I recently saw. But anyway, that's my show for tonight. I'm surrounded by, there's Dash and Sandy are moving around. I don't know what to do about it, but I don't know whether I will be able to do a live stream about the House impeachment vote on Wednesday, or there's actually a Democrat candidate debate on Thursday. I'll see how things go. I actually, Monday, I have to go to a special board meeting of the ACLU of Northern California, voting to possibly support the national ACLU position on favoring the impeachment of Donald Trump. I don't have time to talk about all of that, but anyway, if you want one of these Impeach Trump t-shirts, you have to tell me by the end of Monday, December 16th, because I'm giving them all away. The ones that I haven't sent out on December 17th at a rally, that there are going to be rallies all across the country. I think it's a MoveOn.org rally, although the person I know is from Indivisible, but just look for Impeach Trump, Impeach and Remove Trump rally. If you're in the United States, they're all over the country. And anyway, until I have some reason to upload another video or do another live stream, I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future. And until any of those things happen, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.